Hello, my friends. Rob Roselli coming to you once again. Rob Roselli 1 Facebook website, boxofsunglasses.com, email info@boxofsunglasses.com, and Twitter @Rob Roselli. Today being Thursday, December 1st, 2016, and events unbeknownst to most who sit there and watch Fox News and take that scam seriously. Events are unfolding and news is happening every day, which perhaps explains this effort to get rid of the so-called Russian inspired alternative press in this nation. So the people that are calling everybody else paranoid conspiracy kooks, that is the main establishment in this nation, is now accusing basically every alternative news source out there as subservient to Mother Russia. So if you're not working for the Washington Post, the New York Slimes, the Wall Street Journal, Fox News, these other institutions, these media whores, then you're working for the Russians. This is how ridiculous and unhinged the establishment and the establishment press is becoming in this nation. Now, you may think that's a good thing. I happen to think that they've been working at this quote conspiracy for way too long to let some minor irritation like 200 or 300 million pissed off Americans get in their way. That being said, what we're seeing right now is the Trump train pulling into Washington, and I'm sure many people are becoming more and more disenfranchised and disappointed as the Donald, so-called, who's supposed to be the savior of America, is loading himself up with neocons, ex-government hacks, Washington, D.C. regulars, gangster, bankster types, neocon psychopaths, Fox News cast-offs, and all other sorts of establishment insiders, as Mr. Drain the Swamp is in fact filling his administration to be up with that very swamp he claims to be draining. So the Trump administration, while a vast improvement over Queen Jezebel or what she would have produced, is going nowhere fast. And of course there's something much bigger, as usual, going on here than just the Trump train derailing before it really even pulls into Washington. Let's just face it. I mean, the guy calls Mitt Romney whatever he called him, a rookie, and Romney's calling him a liar, and they're trading insults, and now they're sitting down and having meals together, and who knows what they're talking about. And now we're talking putting Romney in a State Department. Trump just called the guy incompetent and basically a loser, and now he's going to put him in charge of the State Department. So what's Putin thinking over there in Russia, and what's Red China thinking? What a bunch of bozos. Who are these people? Seriously. So that's going nowhere fast. But just to review, who's really in control of this nation is once again the Federal Reserve bankers, and you don't hear an emergency meeting by the Donald to deal with the Federal Reserve bank that still, in fact, runs the nation and, in fact, the world. And don't forget, just to jump back into the quote conspiracy and, a dose of reality here, there's your government right there, the all-seeing eye of Apollo, Osiris, or Nimrod above a capitalist pyramid on the back of your Federal Reserve note, sitting above St. John's the Divine Cathedral, right there at my candidate for Mystery Babylon USA, that being the United States, in New York City in particular, all embedded here. They live the theory of evolution, Great Society of the Undead. Of course, they live John Carpenter's great movie about what's really going on, and one movie that explains the conspiracy. Nothing does a better job of explaining the quote conspiracy than John Carpenter's, many of John Carpenter's movie, but They Live in particular. And of course, We have the Un-American Genocidal Complex, okay, also available on my site. Again, that's boxofsunglasses.com. Okay, and here we talk about the, World War I, the eugenics movement, the Darwin-inspired eugenics movement, okay, Darwinism, and I'll say it, if I said it once, I'll say it a million times, it has nothing to do with science, okay, these are idiots, who eschew and basically violate every known law of science. And I'm talking about physicists. I'm talking about doctorate level physicists who ignore, basic Newtonian physics to make their Big Bang theory work. And speaking of that, okay, just as an aside, a story came out. I think I read it on WorldNet Daily about, now what they're saying is that, well, the Big Bang doesn't really work. It doesn't really conform to physics. Basic Newtonian laws, Newton's universal laws of gravity, that's universal as in universe, well, duh. So now, they're saying, well, it doesn't really work, the Big Bang. And we already know that we can't say that the universe existed for infinity, because they can just bury all this, random growth and random evolution in time. Well, like, they can't really do that anymore, because then you run right smack in the middle of the second law of thermodynamics, which basically means everything, the universe and everything in it is heading for basic entropy or heat death. Okay, everything decays. That's basically what that says. Everything from a dead human to a banana. Okay, everybody knows those things. Everything decays. Okay, if it doesn't, it loses energy, and things tend to the lowest energy. Okay. Things fall apart. I mean, just for not getting too deeply into the science of it. So you can't say that the universe existed for infinity, because then, if that's the fact, then the law of thermodynamics is invalidated, because then the universe should have devolved into nothingness already. Okay, so you jump over to the Big Bang, and now they're saying, well, that's kind of a problem. Things blowing up and then spinning around the Earth and in concentric circles or elliptical paths. The planets rotate around the sun. That doesn't really work anymore. We're no blank Sherlock Holmes. Okay, so now they're saying that there's some kind of alien life form that must have formed a universe. So just think about the progression here. Okay, so we're going to invent this science, not because of any valid foundation and known laws of science. We're going to make the assumption that God doesn't exist and then build our science around it. That's really what evolution is. So in other words, it's 100% about religion and not about science. Okay, so now they're coming out, and then there's this thing called panspermia. Some of you may have heard of, which basically means, aliens, some alien life form produce life in the universe. Okay, panspermia, sperm, just spanning the universe from somewhere. Aliens came and formed the human race, and this kind of dabbles into what the ancient aliens, what they talk about on that show, and all this nonsense. So in other words, they're beating around the bush. The Genesis account has been there since the beginning of really written history, and they keep denying it. And they keep coming up with these ridiculous excuses to get around it, because of course then Genesis is true, and then the Bible is true, and then you have the inconvenience of God and his rules, which humans don't necessarily like to conform to, because humans like to do things their own way. Okay, and of course, when you do things your own way and man becomes the government, then you end up with things like the Nazis. Okay, which is ironic as we circle back to these morons, these idiots, these college kids and these university professors. I mean, taking money from a known self-admitted Nazi sympathizer known as George Soros, calling Trump Hitler. Okay, and meanwhile, you're taking money from a Nazi sympathizer. The core of your organization is something called the Students, the Democratic Socialist of America, okay, which is a forerunner to William Ayers, Obama's buddy, Pharaoh Barry's buddy, William Ayers, and the Weather Underground, the radical Weather Underground, which was bombing police stations and army depots and army bases in the 70s. Okay, so you're calling Trump Hitler, but meanwhile, and Nazis, but meanwhile, the word Nazi means National Socialist. So I mean, how stupid, how idiotic can you be? Drop 200 grand on juniors, send them to college, and they get dumber. Okay, But anyway, getting back to the un-American genocidal complex, okay, you have eugenics, you have Darwin giving a survival of the fittest, okay, social Darwinism, okay, which gave us eugenics, good genes, okay, which means weeding out the imbeciles, morons, misfits, idiots, imbeciles, okay, and this sort of thing, and really resulted in black people ending up in zoos and carnivals in the United States. Okay, there was a black man, a black aborigine by the name of Oda Banga, who was put into the Bronx Zoo in the late 1800s as proof of evolution. So your white, Ivy League, Harvard, liberal eugenics predecessors to the modern liberal Democratic Party saw it fit in their science of evolution to put a black man in the Bronx Zoo as proof of evolution. Okay, and that wasn't good enough for the founder of something called the American Birth Control League, okay, a woman by the name of Margaret Sanger, who was a favorite of Adolf Hitler, as he was of hers. So they had this kind of intercontinental love fest going. You know, Sanger and her eugenical reviewer had many Nazi types writing for her magazine. Okay. And her main goal in life was to, well, why are we putting black people in zoos or wasting money on institutionalizing them? Why don't we just kill them before they're even born? Okay, so that was basically Margaret Sanger. Okay, and I'm paraphrasing her, but that's basically what she said. Now, of course, it became out of style to have an organization that was pro-Hitler and carrying out Hitler's work right here, or attempting to right here in the United States. That became very unpopular for obvious reasons during World War II. So they had to change the name, and they changed the name to Planned Parenthood. Okay, and of course they all these groups post World War II kind of morphed into the radical environmental movement, the population control zealots. Okay, remember here, you know, the Georgia Guidestones brought to us by Robert Christian, or R.C. Christian, or the Rosicrucians. We've talked about them at length in the past. Okay, the Rosicrucians, emblematic of the 18th of the rose plus the cross degree of Freemasonry, or the 18th or 603 score and 6, or 6 plus 6 plus 6 degree degree of Freemasonry, in honor of the man known as Robert Christian, who conforms a lot to the beast of Revelations 13:8. Okay, it is the number of a man, and you have to count it or calculate it, and its number is 603 score and 6. So in other words, it's not some comic book antichrist or some buffoon, and with horns and a tail showing up in some rebuilt temple in Jerusalem. We're talking, we're above that comic book level, hopefully. If you listen to the show enough or read enough of my material, that you dispense with the Trinity Broadcasting Network nonsense, and this comic book antichrist that they like to push. This Islamic kind of Israel. That's where the conflict's going to happen. The United States is not in biblical prophecy, which I say is a load of horse manure. Okay, because just covered in this book alone. If you take Adolf Hitler, okay, you take the American eugenics movement, Adolf Hitler's probably good for what, around 50 million deaths. The eugenics movement, who knows how many deaths, how many sterilizations, a couple million more, say, in the United States alone. You throw in the abortion, okay, that's good for 50 to 60 million. Okay, you spike the smallpox vaccine with the AIDS virus in Africa, and the American homosexual population, what is that good for? Another 20, 30 million. So, it's still, this is Bush League, okay, for our friend Robert Christian, the real Antichrist, okay, builder of the Georgia Guidestones, Skull and Bones, okay, he's at the center of the Skull and Bones, the American Illuminati, and by extension, the United Nations, okay, with its Lucis Trust and its Lucifer Room, okay, in honor of their god Lucifer, okay, the angel of light. Yea, as God said, you shall not eat from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. He knows as soon as you eat from the tree of knowledge of good and evil, the eye shall be opened, okay, the open eye. Okay, I'm trying to keep this simple, but that's basically what's going on here. So, but anyway, so in other words, about 100 million deaths. Okay, it's Bush League. It's nothing. Okay, when we start talking, we talk about the occult conspiracy and World War III, which is impending, by the way, which you're not hearing on Fox News. Now you're getting into your 90% population reductions, as specified on these things, the anti-Ten Commandments of the Georgia Guidestones. Okay, so you're talking real evil here. Okay, not some Islamic Antichrist nonsense. And I'm not saying that that's what's going on in the Middle East and all that. I'm not defending that, and I'm not trying to belittle that. But I'm saying, in contrast to what's going on in the Middle East versus what has gone on and what continues to go on, that emanates from this nation, which, by the way, is no longer my nation. This United States. I mean, the United States is gone. Okay, physically it's here, but right now it exists as a warmongering Federal Reserve controlled corporation. Okay, that's really what this nation is, with a mercenary army and starting wars all over the world for no good reason other than to induce chaos and bring in the Third World War. Okay, per the occult conspiracy, which you can read about if you go through on my website, again, boxofsunglasses.com, and you go through and read. You can read about the occult conspiracy on page 9 of the website, okay, and go through that whole thing and read about Albert Pike and talking about 3 world wars. Well, two of them are covered more or less right here. A little bit on this, touches a little bit on the first and how it was a setup for the second. Okay, really the second was really the setup for the third. Okay, so you're talking real conspiracy stuff here. Okay, real control. Okay, and this is why I refer to these Israel people, and I'm not anti-Israel. Okay, but these biblical literalists and these other clowns that want to take the Book of Revelation literally. That's why I refer to them as the comic book Antichrist crowd, because they're missing so much. Okay, like purposely infecting tens of millions of sub-Saharan Africans with the AIDS virus. Okay, which is, that's old news. Okay, that's nothing, but it's just an example of what goes on and what continues to go on. And by the way, a news story came out. Let's just talk a couple of headlines here. A news story came out recently that some people may remember that there was a mysterious patient zero that supposedly brought the AIDS virus to the United States. Didn't make any sense from a standpoint of epidemiology. Not that I'm an epidemiologist, but you don't have to be. Okay, just in general. Okay, the point of the show is to keep things simple and apply what's called Occam's razor. Okay. You don't have to be an epidemiologist to see that the whole AIDS thing was a scam. Okay, 50 million, black Africans infected with the AIDS virus, and then almost simultaneously, 5 specific cities in the United States. All of a sudden, you had the homosexual population coming up with AIDS. So it didn't. But they tried to invent, the green monkey thing and a so-called patient zero, flying throughout the United States. That was the genesis of the whole plague. Okay. And it didn't make any sense at the time. Lo and behold, almost 30 years later, the story comes out, patient zero never really existed. But that's what happens. It's a news story. It shows up. Nobody really cares. It's forgotten about. But that's how, quote, they get away with stuff. And also, there was another story I came across. University of Alaska came out. Some architects and engineers at the University of Alaska came out and made the determination that there's no way Building 7... Okay, remember Building 7, collapsed 5 o'clock in the afternoon on 9/11. Supposedly it was fires. The only steel frame structure in the history of mankind that collapsed due to fire, even though the fires in it were relatively minor. Okay, but they came out with a study that says there's no way that happened. Okay, that building collapsed due to fire. Okay, that's the University of Alaska. All right. So that kind of just gets swept under the rug. I mean, you don't see that on Fox News. I mean, when's the last time you saw it? You think Bill O'Reilly's going to report on that? You think Bill O'Reilly's going to put that as a headline? University of Alaska, study proves that Building 7 did not collapse due to fire. Okay. You can't even ask the question. Okay, you're not even allowed to ask the question. Well, if didn't what's the next question? Then what did cause Building 7? Then to collapse. And then you right into the quote conspiracy theory. Then you're going to raise the ire of the Fox News crowd and the Limbaughs and the Mark Levines and these other neocon Republican clueless hacks. Okay, who might have a certain level of intelligence, in one aspect, but in reality, they're just wrong about everything. Okay, yeah, Limbaugh was a big NAFTA guy in the '90s, and I confess I used to listen to the guy. Okay, but he was a big NAFTA guy. He was a big, Lee Harvey Oswald, was a lone gunman that killed JFK, and if you opposed that, you were a conspiracy kook. If you opposed the Federal Reserve System, you were a conspiracy kook. We could always outgrow our debt. Okay, this is the kind of idiocy the so-called, what does he call himself, whatever, the EIB or the excellence in broadcasting, whatever, the smartest man, whatever he pats himself on the back, that neocon slob, okay, but he's wrong on everything, okay, except maybe criticizing these idiots, these useful idiots, these low-grade liberals, okay, these modern-day brown shirts, okay, who are doing the bidding of their white criminal, Soros, Rockefeller, Rothschild overlords. Okay, maybe you get that right. Who can't get that right? I mean, calling them a bunch of idiots is like shooting fish in a barrel. But when you start going levels above that, like what did cause Building 7 to collapse? Okay, what exactly is the Federal Reserve System, and who is this? What is this mysterious system? Who are we indebted to? Okay, what exactly? Why do we need the Federal Reserve System again? Okay, and this sort of thing. You're never going to see that in any of these channels. It's just not going to happen. And again, this explains why people are, the mainstream media, so-called, is trying to get people, hopefully like me, hopefully I get big enough to try to get me off the air or accuse me of, conspiring with the Russians or whatever it is. Okay, and truly they live fashion. Okay, John Carpenter's They Live. Now just to review, the three basic principles of this show, okay, that kind of ties it together, try to keep things simple. Number one is the Bible is the infallible word of God. Okay, there's no questioning that. Okay, you have to accept that. If you can't accept that, if you want to question that, then this show is probably not going to work out for you. Okay, number two, and I alluded to this before, is that Israel is not God's chosen people. Okay, it's just, I don't know how much more clear, God, the Word became flesh and, dwelt among us. John chapter 1 talking about Jesus. I don't know how much more clear it can be when Jesus goes in John chapter 8 and says, calls the Jews, the sons of the devil in Matthew 23 and says, how can you escape being condemned to hell? And then a covenant with Judas. Okay, Judas is indwelled by Satan, and then the Pharisees make a covenant with him, and then they go out and convince the Jewish population in Jerusalem at large to crucify Jesus. I don't know how much more clear you can be on that. Okay, and again, I'm not anti-Israel, and the remnant of Israel will be saved per Ezekiel 36, and Israel was established by God or reestablished in 1948. This is all clearly explained in Ezekiel 36. Okay, God is basically just trying to save face. Is what it boils down to. Okay, so that just explains it. Okay, so if you're going to sit there and say that Israel's God's chosen people, this is why these so-called experts on the Trinity Broadcasting Network, this is why these guys are so far off the mark. Okay, this is why these guys are waiting, sitting around waiting for the temple to be rebuilt and all this. Meanwhile, Russia's we're about 2 steps away from World War III, and the world economy is on the verge of implosion. It's not going to take 7 years. Okay, if this Jewish temple, they started building this thing today, it would take years. Okay, and then you're supposed to have the 7-year tribulation, then a rapture, and then all this nonsense. Okay, and a lot of it, the foundation of a lot of it is these people it's inexplicable to me. Okay, why that's even a subject of debate. But anyway, and then that segues right to principle number 3. Well, if Israel is not the focal point, at least right now, at least if you're in the United States listening to this right now, Israel will become a focal point, but that's after the United States is, basically EMP'd or nuked back into the Stone Age, okay, per Revelation 17 and 18. And on my link, the United States is the Mystery Babylon of Revelation 17 and 18. Okay, and I have the line-by-line breakdown, and we did some videos on this. And by the way, you can go to my YouTube channel. Old videos with the descriptions, the basic summaries of the shows is posted on my site. Again, it's boxofsunglasses.com, or you can read about it, the Mystery Babylon link on the website. And I make the case and a line-by-line breakdown of Revelation 17 and 18, and it's playing out like today's current events. Okay, in other words, things are going to happen quite rapidly. Okay, right now, just to kind of make the bridge back to the current events. Okay, right now the United States economy is being run by toilet paper. It's being held together by toilet paper, and I'm talking about this thing right here. Okay, this debt instrument known as the Federal Reserve note, which most of us call a dollar. Okay, it's created. When a dollar is created, it's a debt instrument. Okay, ultimately, the Federal Reserve creates a dollar out of nothing. Okay, and it loans it to the banks, and the banks loan it to the government, and the government loans it to China, and Japan, and Russia loan it back to us, and it's just one big circle jerk. Okay, all the economic experts from Harvard and MSNBC can say whatever they want, and Rush Limbaugh and the rest of the idiots, but at the end of the day, it's an instrument of debt. Okay, so the people running that whole thing, running the world. So how are you going to say that has nothing to do, that doesn't have a place in end times prophecy? It's just, it doesn't make any sense. Okay, but we will have chaos. We will have the unfolding chaos, the mathematical certainty that is the Federal Reserve, which is a calamitous economic collapse of biblical proportions. Okay, and it's going to happen rapidly because right now all they're doing is papering over the whole thing. Okay, so in other words, basically what's happening right now is there's no demand for the United States debt. Okay, in other words, China, Japan, and Saudi Arabia and these other nations around the world have all these United States dollars because we're buying all their cheap slave labor crap that these countries make, or in the case of Saudi Arabia, buying the oil that for some reason we can't drill in this country. Okay, that's a whole other story. But anyway, so instead of the Federal Reserve just endlessly printing its own money, which would kind of expose the whole scam for what it is, which is basically a game of Monopoly, and little kids playing Monopoly, and one of the little kids is giving out money to everybody, and basically hyperinflating the economy. That's what it boils down to. Okay, but anyway, those nations are not buying the treasury bonds. Okay, so how's the government going to pay for millions and millions of illegal aliens, and how's it going to afford to keep giving people free food? And we don't make anything in this country anymore. Okay, the only thing we make is, well, tainted vaccines. Okay, what are our exports? Tainted vaccines and the United States dollar debt. Okay, we export our debt and our CDOs, our collateralized debt obligations, and all this other nonsense to these foreign nations. But anyway, what's happened in the past is the nations, the United States floats a bond and they take the dollars, they take their existing dollars and they buy our treasury bonds and kind of float the debt. So the Federal Reserve wasn't just, blindly printing money on its own and giving away the whole scam. But nations have stopped doing that. Okay, so we're back to what's called this scam called quantitative easing, which basically means the Federal Reserve creates new money and buys the government's bonds back because nobody wants to buy them. And it's almost like it's equivalent basically to a stock buyback. Okay, and that's not exactly technically correct, but the principle's the same. So with these companies, with these stock buybacks, these companies are buying their own stocks and they'll inflate their own prices, make their books look good. Okay, I guess it would be kind of like equivalent situation if you owned a business and you took your business credit card and went ahead and bought services from your own business to make your books look good. Well, you're going to debt. It's that ridiculous and that stupid is the point. Okay, you can cover it over with MSNBC and the neon lights and the morons on Fox Business News and these other imbeciles, but that's, at the end of the day, that's what's happening. So that bubble's going to pop like it mathematically must, and that's going to happen suddenly because the government's certainly not going to tell you about it. What's going to happen is, say, in the course of a few days or a week, is you're going to find out you can't go to the ATM and get money. Your assets are frozen in the bank, okay, because the government is going to get to a point where it can't print any more money without failing. Nobody's buying its bonds, so the only choice that can be left to it, just like the last electroshocks or whatever, to revive a dead person, is they're going to just take money right out of people's accounts. Okay, I think in Greece and Cyprus, I think they called it, there was the Fox and the other idiots on the news had a term for it, like taking a haircut. What it really means is, the government and the banks were going into people's personal savings, people that have worked their whole lives to save, scratch together a few bucks and spend their last 10 years on earth and relative economic security. The governments and the banks went in and just took that money right out of their accounts. Okay, and that'll happen here relatively quickly, and then you'll have a financial collapse, the end of the SNAP cards, the EBT cards. Okay, the electronic soup kitchen lines that existed in the 1920s, the Depression. Okay, these soup kitchen, these lines that you don't see, that the pictures you saw from the Dust Bowl and this all this sort of thing. What they are right now are the welfare lines and the SNAP cards. Okay, so it's gone electronic, but these lines are still there. The government continues to paper over the whole thing. Okay, and at the same time, you have a war. Okay, you have the war footing in the Middle East and in Europe. Okay, Russia and Syria. Russia's going to defend its best ally in the Middle East along the Mediterranean coast, not being Syria. The United States, for some reason, wants to get involved in a country we have no business being involved in, creating another power vacuum. We're trying to, like we did in Libya, creating in large part this migrant crisis in Europe, which is starting to spill over into this nation. Okay, but it's going to result in World War III. So then you have to ask yourself, well, at some point, you get to the end of logic. Okay, logic doesn't exist anymore. You say, well, why do we have trillions of dollars in debt? We have to be indebted to somebody. Okay, if we're in debt, if the countries and the people of the world are in debt, who are we indebted to? Okay, nobody asks that simple question. All right. Part of it is, United States, okay, we buy some bonds from China, but ultimately, where did the debt instrument known as the Federal Reserve note, where did it originate? Okay, it's just like with the 9/11 thing and Building 7. If you start asking questions, if you just question it, well, then you're a conspiracy kook, and that's how they get away with it. Okay, they have their quote liberal and progressive on one side, and the Rush Limbaugh, Fox News neocon crowd on the other side, doing this all the time, keeping people off the real target. Okay, which is the media. The 6 media companies in this nation that control the education establishment in this nation, and again, it all kind of pyramids back, figuratively and literally, to this. Okay, that's your control. Okay, and who controls this? But Robert Christian. Okay, is documented in this book. And who's Robert Christian? But again, to go back to review once again, because this is important, the marriage of the rose, or the male, emblematic of the male sun god Osiris, and the cross. That's the C part of the Christian, or the female goddess Isis, or Artemis, or Diana, or Luna, Libertas, or Columbia, whatever you want to call her. Okay. Now, again, the rose, symbolic of secrecy, or the dead god, or the secret god Osiris, or Apollo, which, by the way, is the Apollyon of Revelation chapter 9. Okay, so you have the Occident, and then they had a son, Occident, and Columbia had a son known as Horus, or the Pharaoh, which is the Pharaoh of ancient Egypt. Okay, so you had Isis and Osiris. Isis was killed, okay, symbolically, which means the Lucifer being kicked out of the Garden of Eden. Okay, that's the symbology of the dead Osiris, or the dead sun god, was that Lucifer. And the high-level Freemasons, I have no mistake about it. These people literally worship Lucifer. I'm not just saying that to be funny. I mean, hell, no pun intended. Without going off on a tangent right now, it's right in front of your face. Okay, but anyway, so Osiris being dead, but the only part that survives was his phallus. Okay, which is represented by a certain obelisk. Okay, a certain concrete structure known as an obelisk, and it just so happens that the one appears, one of the most prominent appears in St. Peter's Square, the so-called Christian Catholic Church. Okay, so the Pope wearing his hat emblematic of the fish god Dagon, who also relates directly to Apollo or Apollyon. Okay, gets up every morning and stares at his obelisk in St. Peter's Square of the phallus of the dead Egyptian sun god Apollo or Osiris. Okay, and of course we have the 555-foot tall obelisk sitting right there in Washington, D.C., or the 6,660-inch high by 55.5 feet, or 666-inch base obelisk in Washington, D.C., facing the womb of the Capitol building, with its Minerva or Luna goddess on top of it. So you have the obelisk facing the womb of Isis. Okay, bring the two together, and what do you get? You get the son of the sun god, or Horus, which was again the Pharaoh. Every Pharaoh of ancient Egypt was known as the son of Isis and Osiris, or Horus. Okay. And again, the two of these names that are associated with the male are the Occident, or the West, or the setting sun. Okay, the dead sun god, and Columbia, or the female in the East. She has the sun, the rising sun, the new sun, or Horus. Okay, and of course then we have Pharaoh Barry, who went to, supposedly, but we don't know anything about him because he hasn't released his records, supposedly went to, of all the colleges they could have made up about this guy, supposedly went to Occidental University and Columbia University in New York on the West Coast and the East Coast, respectively. And I know for a fact Obama never stepped foot on Columbia University campus. There's no evidence that he was ever there. Nobody can remember him. No academic records, no yearbook photos. But yet this charismatic community organizer guy, okay, this charismatic, get up in front of millions of people worldwide. Remember 2008. Yet, no, not a soul remembers him at Columbia University. I guess what I'm getting at very simply is he's the modern day Pharaoh, and ruled by his Egyptian, his Rockefeller, Rothschild, Kissinger, Brzezinski, Soros, Egyptian high priest overlords. It's that simple, okay? Which also plays into my supposition that the United States is the mystery Babylon of Revelation 17 and 18, okay? So which means, so you have an economic collapse and a very fast, okay, remember in Revelation 17, they shall hate the whore. The world shall hate the whore, which the world basically hates the United States right now for our debt and what we've done with our debt and our IMF and our Federal Reserve and our endless wars, okay, our endless stupid, pointless wars, okay. Remember the war on terror, and they hate us because of our freedoms and all this childish nonsense, okay. George Bush, and, we talked about Building 7 already. So you get that whole scam. So don't think the world's looking at it. The world hates us. Okay. So everything is falling into place. But then for economic collapse and World War III to happen in very quick succession. And by the way, 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, while they're crying peace and safety, then sudden destruction shall befall them. Okay, so that's coming into play as well. Okay, and I happen to think, and the more I think about it, is this whole Trump train nonsense. Okay, it's, everybody's calling, crying for peace and safety, and yay Trump, but it's all a setup. Okay, Trump ain't changing nothing. All right, okay, yeah, he's irritating a little bit the so-called establishment. They wanted the Clinton Bush, and Bush was the new Mitt Romney. Supposed to go in there and just take the fall for Hillary and, coronate the White House for Hillary. Not that she was going to ever make it anyway. I happen to believe that Obama's number 44, and number 44 is it for presidents. Maybe we can cover that in the next show, but you can read about that on, the Mystery Babylon link. Okay, there's some Obama links on the homepage, again, boxofsunglasses.com. But anyway, you have, it was whatever's supposed to happen, but it's irrelevant, okay, because the economy is going to collapse. We're $20 trillion in debt, online debt, and counting, okay. What I mean by online debt is that the actual government debt is somewhere between 100 and 200 trillion with a T. We have something like, what's our GDP in this nation? Something like, what is it, like 3 or 4 trillion, okay. So in other words, if you make say 30 or 40,000 a year, and you're carrying $1 to $2 million in deficit, you're not going to last too long. That's basically the state of the United States right now. Okay, so when that bubble pops, it's going to be fast, it's going to be calamitous, and it's going to be ugly. Okay, and it's just things are just developing along those lines. Okay, I can't say that, I can't emphasize that enough. So without constantly repeating, just to say this, okay, you're going to get to a point where logic, you come to logic's end. All right, and guys are going to, people are on there saying, well, the economy, the neocons want to do this, they want to save the petrodollar and all that. Yeah, maybe it's part of their overall plan, but then you say, well, why are you going to try and, first of all, why would you invent the petrodollar, which is basically toilet paper, which mathematically has to turn to toilet paper because it's an instrument, it's a debt-created instrument. It doesn't represent commerce, it doesn't represent trade, it represents debt to a group of international bankers. So mathematically, it has to collapse. Logically, it has to collapse. Okay, if you just think about it, well, if we can just keep going into debt, and debt's not an issue, Paul Krugman, that New York Times imbecile, that Keynesian maniac, just about as stupid as Rush Limbaugh, okay, the left's equivalent of Rush Limbaugh, okay, saying you have to go into debt to get out of debt, and debt is good and whatever. Stupid ass, you dumbass. I mean, think about that. If that's the case, then think about it logically. Then why does anybody need to work? Why do we need to pay taxes? Just, if you need money, just print it. Government, just give everybody in the nation $1 million. Nobody works. Everybody just drives their cars and their nice cars. Everybody drives an Escalade and gets the $1 million house because debt doesn't matter. So the government should just, you think about, that's asinine. That's stupid. That doesn't make any sense. It's just adults playing a Monopoly game. That's exactly correct. Okay, so the people that invented this system, they're not that stupid. So it's not about, it's about the monetary wealth, but it's really not. It's bigger than that. Okay, it's an insatiable appetite for greed. Okay, and if I could find a passage in Proverbs, okay, and this is really what these people are under. Okay, what's really at play here? I'm going to say Proverbs 28. I'll try and find it for the I don't know, maybe I have the wrong chapter in the book of the Proverbs. It basically says there's 4 things that are never satisfied. Okay, the earth, the fire, okay, and greed. insatiable appetite of greed and the barren womb, and there's symbolic meanings to all those. So basically, that's what's going on here spiritually. That's what's going on behind these people that rule the earth, that want to rule the earth. They have this insatiable appetite. That's reflected in people like John Rockefeller and Andrew Carnegie, J.P. Morgan, okay, your George Soros, your modern day criminal bankers, your Rothschild family, okay. You know, there's just whatever they get, it's never enough. They're never satisfied. Okay, their minds, they're shot. Their desire for greed and debt, debt, slavery, and all this, it's insatiable. Okay, it cannot be satisfied. They've given their lives over to Robert Christian or Satan. Okay, and this is really what explains everything, and I illustrate that in this book. Okay, Pleased to Meet You. It's also available on my website. I try to illustrate this because you can listen to all these economic shows and who everybody has their ideas of what's going on and who wants to save the petrodollar and what this geopolitical movement means, but at some point you get to logic's end. You say, wait a second, well, you're going to risk World War III for a gas pipeline through Syria? What the hell sense does that make? Okay, why are you killing 100 million people with abortion and the AIDS virus? Why'd you invent Adolf Hitler? Okay, it's more than just basic greed going on here. Okay, these people are shot just like the Pharaoh facing down Moses in the book of Exodus. Okay, the 10 plagues going back to Exodus. Okay, even after he knew, even his own high priest told Pharaoh, Horus. You remember the sun god, the son of the god. This guy seriously thought he was God. He was Satan. Okay, he was going to not rule the earth. He was going to rule the universe. And being Satan incarnate, okay, Satan in the flesh. And that's why he never really got the hint. Okay, after 10 plagues. Okay, the hail, the dead cattle, the frogs, the Nile River, turning the Nile River to blood, which is direct attack on Osiris, by the way. Okay, Osiris was the god of the Nile River. Every August 5th or thereabouts, which just so happens to be the birthday of Pharaoh Barry, August 5th, the mystery man. Nobody knows, no birth certificate, no birthday, but it just happens, just like he went to Oxford and Columbia University, he's born on August 5th, which just so happens to be the rising of the dog star, or the star Sirius in Egypt, in ancient Egypt, which represented the rising of the Nile River, courtesy of their dead, god from underneath, Osiris. But anyway, that's the story of Pharaoh. It's the same as Pharaoh Barry and his handlers. Okay, there's nothing that can satisfy these people. Okay, so they're gonna destroy the earth and think that they're gonna live in some Luciferian paradise after 90% of the world's population is gone, order out of chaos. Okay, in honor of the another form of Apollo, the Greek god Pan. Okay, or the Roman god Bacchus, the god of revelry, insanity, pandemonium, wine, drunkenness. Okay, wine, corn oil, and wine. Okay, those are the three minerals, we'll call them. Okay, Freemasonry, they talk about corn oil and wine. Well, corn is the dead, represents Osiris. Okay, the oil, the light or illumination, Apollo. Okay, and the wine, revelry or insanity or pandemonium of Pan / the Green Man / Dionysus, Bacchus, or whoever you want to call it. Okay, so the Freemasonry does draw from mythology, which in turn draws right from the account in Genesis. Okay, Cain and Abel. Okay, Cain being the original devil. Okay, as referenced in John chapter 8. You are your father the devil. He was a murderer from the beginning. Well, who was the first murderer in the beginning? Was Cain. Okay, so it's pretty obvious what's going on here. So this is the story behind the story. What you're seeing in this four-dimensional scam we call reality, okay, really is reflected in God's word. And I try to kind of, the best job I can in this book right here, Pleased to Meet You, to kind of explain things in a way that makes some kind of sense, because trying to put a pipeline through Syria and starting World War III over that doesn't make a lot of sense. Inventing a system whose mathematical endpoint is economic collapse doesn't make a lot of sense. Okay, starting a world war, nuclear war with Russia over a country, a relatively stable and decent, not a great country, but an okay country like Syria, okay, starting World War III over trying to overtake that nation we have no business being in, and we have no strategic interest in it, doesn't make sense. Trying to start World War III with China, when China's the one that's making our military hardware and loaning us a lot of the money to float our economy. I mean, I'm not talking about insanity. But anyway, starting World War III with China over some fake islands in the South China Sea doesn't make sense. Doesn't make logical sense. The only context that makes sense is these people are pushing for World War III because they want the 90% population reduction. Okay, so in other words, Hitler and AIDS and diverting tens of thousands of acres, of usable farmland to feed hungry people for corn-based ethanol, tainting different vaccines with different viruses and chemicals. That's not getting it done fast enough. Okay, that's not going to reduce the world's population by 90%, but a nuclear war sure will. That'll induce the chaos thereafter. Okay, that'll be the phoenix rising from the ashes. Okay, remember we talked about the haunt or the home of every unclean and dirty bird. Okay, Horus, the falcon god Horus. Okay, the phoenix rising from the ashes. The Freemasons, phoenix rising from the ashes, order out of chaos. Okay, the feathered serpent, the feathered flying serpent known, the Central American Aztec Mayan god known as Quetzalcoatl. Okay, you're starting to see the pattern here. Okay. So again, this is why I say my principle number one, getting back to that, the Bible is the core of the quote conspiracy. You could sit here and talk geopolitics and, economics and this and that and whatever, and bond and treasury sales and who's doing what, but at some point the logic and the sanity is going to stop. Okay. And then you're in total darkness. Okay. Which is why, John chapter 1, Jesus was the light of the world, and that light was the life of men, okay, or people, all right? Don't want to get into the whole man and woman thing in the Bible, okay? But ultimately, just speaking of that, Galatians chapter 3, there's no male or female. We're all one in Christ Jesus, and it is, I'll go off on a tangent right now, but anyway, that's the point, okay? Jesus was the light. Okay, so this whole world is dark. I mean, not literally dark. Again, there's that literal figurative thing. Okay, in John chapter 9, remember Jesus heals the blind man, and the Pharisees, who obviously could see physically at the end of John chapter 9, they come and say, well, surely you don't mean that we're blind also. Jesus says, well, if you were blind, your sins will be forgiven, but because you say you can see, your sin is not forgiven. So what's Jesus talking about? It doesn't make any sense. Of course they could see. They're educated. They're the leaders of Jerusalem. Of course they could see. But Jesus says you're blind. What's he talking about? All right. This is what he's talking about. He's talking about himself. He's talking about understanding what's really going on here. Okay. Remember, I think it's Matthew 13. Jesus says, kings and experts and intellectuals throughout history have been searching to solve the mystery. But if you listen to me and you understand me, I'm unlocking the mystery for you. And I'm paraphrasing Matthew 13, but that's exactly the point. In other words, the physicists who I was talking about at the top of the show, maybe have 200 IQs, but they're idiots. Okay? They'll sacrifice the most fundamental laws of physics to invent a Big Bang or a universe that's 100 billion years old or panspermia or whatever it is to avoid admitting that there's a God. Okay, they'll invent all this scientific nonsense to make what's the theological argument. Okay, So you don't have to be particularly intelligent to figure this out, is my point. Okay. Just take a deep breath. Okay. Boxofsunglasses.com. God's Simple Salvation Plan. It's probably the most important link. Okay, above all this nonsense, this sea of nonsense and despair that unfortunately we'll have to deal with here. Not that I'm happy about it, and I don't want to be here talking about it, but that doesn't eliminate the fact of its reality. Okay, God's Simple Salvation Plan is there. The link is there. I suggest if you're listening to this, or that you become very familiar with it. Okay, because evil is always been in control of the world, but now it's manifesting itself. It's coming online. It's becoming unhinged. It's becoming exposed. Okay. That's it. Rob Roselli, boxofsunglasses.com. Good night and God bless.